Mom, please help me, my daughter cried. She had just gotten married 3 months ago, and now, suddenly, she showed up at my doorstep in the middle of the night. What on earth happened? When I saw her, her face was swollen and covered in bruises. I was speechless at the sight of my daughter's changed appearance. Then, as I listened to her story, I trembled with anger. This is unforgivable. Was his promise to make her happy all a lie? I vowed to get revenge on those people who had done this to my precious daughter. I'm Linda, 50 years old. I divorced when my daughter, Emma, was still young and raised her while working full-time. Although Emma is reserved, she has a strong heart and is a hard worker. Through her persistent efforts, she managed to get a job at the company she had always dreamed of. Emma's presence has been my motivation, helping me move forward even in difficult times. So when she told me, "There's someone I want you to meet," my heart fluttered with joy. The person Emma introduced me to was a man named Jack, who worked at one of their client companies and was 7 years older than my daughter. He looked dashing in his suit and greeted me cheerfully. He seemed serious and sincere at first glance. "I've come today to ask for your blessing for Emma and me to get married," he said. Barely after introducing himself, he came out with such a statement. Emma was only 23 at the time and had only been dating Jack for about 6 months. I had expected to just meet her boyfriend, so I was honestly taken aback. "Well, you're both still young. Don't you think it's a bit early to be thinking about the future?" I gently tried to discourage them, but he straightened his posture and looked me straight in the eye. "I can't think of anyone but Emma anymore. I believe I'll never meet another wonderful woman like her." He pleaded with a serious expression, telling me how much he cared for my daughter. "Jack, I feel the same way, Mom. Please give us your blessing for our marriage," Emma added. If the two of them had already made up their minds, then I would support them. Moved by his passionate feelings and hearing Emma's plea, I gave my consent for them to be together. "Thank you so much. I promise I'll make Emma happy," Jack said. As I watched my daughter and him gaze at each other happily, I couldn't help but smile too. However, after Jack left, I couldn't fully rejoice in their marriage, and an uneasy feeling started to well up inside me. Is this really okay? Isn't it too soon? But I've heard that all parents have mixed feelings when their children get married. To be honest, I had thought my daughter's marriage was still far off, so I probably just wasn't mentally prepared. They looked so happy together. "It'll be fine," I reassured myself. After that, we met Jack's parents, and things progressed smoothly towards the wedding. They were both only children, and Jack's parents, who had always wanted a daughter, seemed to really like Emma. "Mom, I'm thinking of living with Jack's parents after we get married," Emma said. While it's nice that they're fond of her, it seemed they had suggested living together. "Are you sure about this?" "I don't have experience, but I've heard that living with in-laws can be challenging," I replied. "I get along well with his parents, and with Jack there, I'm not worried," she said. "Well, I'm sure you can handle it," I thought, since she was sincere and always loved by her elders. Besides, their family home was only a 20-minute drive from my house, so I felt reassured that I could rush over if anything happened. And so, after the wedding ceremony was over, my daughter's new life in her in-laws' home began. I thought Emma must be eagerly working hard, but about a month after she moved in, changes started to occur. The daily messages from Emma stopped coming, and even when I sent her messages, I rarely got a reply. I didn't want to interfere too much, but I was concerned, so I decided to call her cell phone. "Mother-in-law, what's the matter?" To my surprise, it was Jack who answered the phone. "Could I speak to Emma?" "She's in the bath right now." "Don't worry, she's doing fine," he said. His tone was soft but somehow left no room for argument, and I ended up hanging up without hearing my daughter's voice. After that, there were still no messages or calls from Emma. I decided to go and see her in person. Jack's mother had told me to come visit anytime, so I went to their family home on the weekend. Jack's mother responded through the intercom, curtly telling me that Emma was out with Jack. "I'm sorry for coming suddenly. Do you know what time they'll be back?" When I asked this, all I got in response was a big sigh. "You should call before coming." "I don't know when they'll be back," she said. Feeling that she had a point, I couldn't say anything more and had to leave. I wondered if I was worrying too much, but it felt like Jack and his mother's attitudes had changed from before the wedding, and I couldn't shake off this bad feeling. After much deliberation, thinking I'd feel better if I could at least hear her cheerful voice, I called Emma's workplace. To my shock, I was told that she had already resigned. Moreover, they said, "We're in trouble because she quit so suddenly." There's no way Emma would quit her job like that. When she received the job offer from her dream company, we cried tears of joy together. Besides, Emma was excited about balancing work and housework, so it didn't make sense for her to suddenly resign. Something is definitely wrong. But what should I do? Even if I visited Jack's house again, I wasn't sure what to expect. If only they'd let me see Emma. While I was debating whether to contact the police, the incident occurred. It was 2 days after I learned about my daughter's resignation, in the middle of the night. Suddenly, the doorbell rang.
What?
Who could it be? At 2 a.m. Suspiciously, I peeked at the intercom screen. It was dark, and I couldn't see clearly, but from the figure, it looked like Emma. I ran to the entrance and hurriedly opened the door. What happened? I've been so worried because I couldn't contact you. Mom, I'm sorry. My joy at seeing my daughter was short-lived. The next moment, I was shocked and lost for words. Emma's face was unrecognizable, swollen, and covered in bruises. What on earth happened to you? You're in such a state. For a while, my daughter trembled and cried, and I just rubbed her back without saying anything, trying to calm her down. Emma began to speak haltingly, her voice choked with emotion. As I listened, it became clear that immediately after the wedding, Jack's attitude had changed completely. He said, "You've come here as a wife, so you should serve us," and treated her like a slave. The terrible state she was in was the result of Jack and his parents. I had suspected as much when Emma came running to my house, but as I heard the details, I trembled with anger. I didn't want to trouble you, but I'm sorry. Seeing my daughter cry like this, I felt a desire for revenge against them well up inside me. I wanted to make them suffer the torments of hell. I vowed in my heart never to forgive Jack and his parents, who had promised to make her happy, but had hurt my daughter so much. For now, I let Emma rest and decided to confront Jack's family once daylight broke. The next morning, we first went to the hospital to have her injuries treated, and then I drove with my daughter to their house. As expected, they were in an uproar, having noticed Emma's absence. "So, you took her after all?" Jack's father shouted angrily when he realized it was me at the intercom. "Can you explain why Emma is in this condition?" I asked sternly, unfazed by his response. Next to me stood my daughter, her cheeks still swollen with bandages on her wounds, looking pitiful. Seeing this, they seemed to become conscious of the neighbor's eyes and let us into the house. The three of them faltered for a moment, but soon showed their true colors. Jack's mother glared at Emma and said with a sneer, "We were just disciplining her a bit because she wasn't working properly." "What are you saying? And Jack, didn't you declare that you would make my daughter happy?" "Well, that was on the condition that she fulfilled her role as a wife properly, but she was too preoccupied with her job. That's why I submitted her resignation letter for her," Jack responded coldly. Emma hadn't quit her job voluntarily. Jack had submitted her resignation without her knowledge. She tearfully explained that by the time she realized it, it was too late. Apparently, the reason was that Jack didn't like that Emma's work had become busy, and she was coming home later than him. Emma was working hard because she was happy to be employed at her dream company. "That's not my concern. If she can't balance both, she has to quit," Jack said as if he had done nothing wrong. He's right. The other day, it took her an hour just to make dinner. "She can't do a single household chore properly," Jack's father added, joining in the attack. My daughter's shoulders shook. If that's the case, couldn't Jack's mother have supported her? However, Jack's mother crossed her arms and said in a strong tone, "When I came here as a bride, I was made to do everything and told to learn through experience." "That's right. It's generational change, but I was watching over her properly," Jack's father added, as if to say they had done nothing wrong. They nodded at each other. Apparently, Jack's mother had pushed all the housework onto Emma while doing whatever she wanted. Moreover, Jack's father, who had already retired and was at home, had been constantly monitoring Emma, interfering with everything she did. They had even taken away Emma's phone to prevent her from telling me about this. When I visited their house, they had restrained her to prevent her from going outside. And this wasn't all. Emma had believed that Jack would change someday, that he would help her despite the terrible treatment. But Emma's hope that Jack would change was in vain. The treatment from her in-laws only escalated. They made her eat leftovers and, claiming it was a waste of gas, barely let her use more than a trickle of water for showers. When Emma, unable to bear it any longer, told them, "This isn't right," it led to the unbearable injuries on her body. In response to my daughter's objection, they called her insolent and slapped her hard on the cheek. Not only that, saying they would re-educate her, they took turns beating her all over her body. Finally released, while covered in injuries, Emma felt her life was in danger. Waiting for the moment when all three were sound asleep, she fled from her in-laws' house. She walked for over an hour, barely escaping with her life, before arriving at our house. Before the wedding, they treated Emma preciously. Why did they change so much? I can't accept this. When I confronted them with a strong tone, the three looked at each other and smirked. From the beginning, I just wanted a wife who would obey me. I thought Emma would make a good servant, Jack said nonchalantly. His mother sighed, saying she was really disappointing. Well, she must have learned her lesson from this incident. Why don't we give her another chance? Jack's father suggested, unbelievably. They looked at each other and burst into laughter. That's enough. I couldn't forgive them anymore. Before I could respond, anger welling up from every part of my body, Emma stared at the three of them and spoke out. "How dare you speak to us like that?" When an angry Jack tried to grab my daughter, I quickly restrained him in a hold and pinned him to the floor, immobilizing him as he struggled. His parents stood dumbfounded at my quick movement. "I didn't mention it before," I said, "but when I was young, I was on the verge of making it to the Olympics in wrestling. I had to give it up due to an injury." I increased the pressure on Jack, who was pinned down, and he started flailing his arms and legs with tears in his eyes. When I loosened my grip, he slumped down, sitting weakly. How pathetic. Now, who should I deal with next? I said, cracking my knuckles as I slowly approached his parents. "Please stop," they cried, covering their heads and trembling violently. "I sent my daughter off wishing for her happiness, but I will never forgive you for putting her through this." All three of them shrank back completely at my fierce demeanor. "Jack, please divorce me," Emma said, following my lead, and presented the divorce papers in front of him. "What are you talking about?" "I absolutely won't divorce you," he refused, his face turning red. "This morning, I took my daughter to the hospital and got a medical certificate for her injuries. I've also filed a police report. We have no fault in this, so we'll fight this to the end," I told them, slowly looking at each of the three in turn. At this, they started sweating profusely and panicking, crying out things like, "Please stop," and, "What about our reputation?" "I want a divorce as soon as possible," Emma said, looking at them with disgust. "I look forward to seeing what happens to you now. You'd better regret what you've done." We gathered Emma's belongings and headed for the entrance. "Wait," we heard Jack's pitiful voice behind us, but Emma and I left her in-law's house without looking back. After that, the divorce was successfully finalized, and Emma claimed $50,000 in compensation from Jack. The police report was also accepted, and the three of them were questioned by the police, although they were released soon after. I heard that the police also came to their house to inspect the scene, which became a topic of gossip in the neighborhood. They were now being looked at with suspicion. When Emma told her former colleagues about the mistreatment she received from Jack, the news spread to his company, which was their client, and Jack was removed from the fast track to promotion. Meanwhile, Emma slowly healed her mental and physical wounds at our home and then started moving forward to find a new workplace. As for me, my life is still far from over too. In fact, I've started training again because I want to get involved with wrestling once more. They looked at each other and burst into laughter. That's enough. I couldn't forgive them anymore. Before I could respond, anger welling up from every part of my body, Emma stared at the three of them and spoke out.